I knew something was wrong the moment I pushed open my front door and heard the sound of running water inside my house. For 3 seconds, I stood frozen in the afternoon sunlight, my hand still gripping the grocery bag, my heart beating so hard it felt like it was trying to escape my chest. Then I stepped inside and saw the last person I ever expected to find on her knees in my kitchen, wearing yellow rubber gloves, scrubbing the floor like her life depended on it. It was my boss, Maribel Voss, the woman everyone at the office feared, the woman who never smiled unless a deal was closing, the woman who had once told me that weakness was just another name for poor planning. And there she was, cleaning my house with tears in her eyes. Before this story continues, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel Ancient Truth if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet miracles that happen when one human being refuses to give up on another. My name is Rowan Vale, and until that day, I thought I understood loneliness. I thought loneliness was coming home to an empty house after a 12-hour shift. I thought it was eating cold leftovers standing over the sink because sitting at the table made the silence too loud. I thought it was keeping my late mother's bedroom door closed because the smell of her lavender soap still lived in the curtains, and I was not strong enough to face it. But real loneliness, I learned, is when you are drowning in plain sight and everyone thinks you are just busy. For 8 months after my mother passed away, my life became a slow collapse. I worked at a downtown architecture firm as a junior project coordinator, though junior mostly meant I handled everyone else's emergencies and apologized for problems I did not create. My boss, Maribel, ran the firm like a storm in designer heels. She was brilliant, controlled, impossible to impress, and famous for remembering every mistake anyone ever made. I was terrified of her, but I also admired her. She had built Voss and Lark from nothing, and every client treated her like she could turn steel and glass into magic. Around her, people stood straighter, spoke faster, and hid their exhaustion better. I was not hiding mine well. At first, I only missed small things. A meeting note here, a phone call there. Then I started arriving late with damp hair and mismatched socks. My shirts were wrinkled. My eyes were swollen. I drank too much coffee and still felt like I was walking underwater. Every morning, I told myself I would get my house together when I got home. Every evening, I opened the door, saw the laundry piled on the couch, the dishes crusted in the sink, the unopened sympathy cards on the table, and I shut down. Grief did not crash through my life like thunder. It settled over everything like dust. One Thursday morning, Maribel stopped beside my desk and looked at me for a long moment. She did not ask if I was okay. People like her did not ask soft questions in public. She only placed a corrected file on my desk and said I had missed a permit deadline again. Her voice was calm, but the office went quiet. My face burned. I tried to explain, but the words stuck somewhere behind my ribs. She looked at me with those sharp gray eyes and said that everyone had pain, but not everyone brought it to work. Then she walked away, leaving me smaller than I had felt in years. That afternoon, I made another mistake. I sent an unfinished proposal to a major client. It was not catastrophic, but it was embarrassing, and in Maribel's world, embarrassment was almost worse than disaster. She called me into her office just after lunch. Sunlight poured through the glass walls, making the city behind her look clean and golden, while I stood there feeling like I had mud on my soul. She told me I was talented, but talent without discipline was a liability. She said she could not keep protecting me from consequences. I stared at the floor and nodded, because part of me believed I deserved every word. The next day, I took half a day off. I told HR it was for a personal appointment, but really I just could not breathe in that office anymore. I went to the grocery store because my refrigerator held only mustard, old apples, and a carton of milk that had turned sour. The summer afternoon was bright and ordinary. Cars passed. Children laughed outside a bakery. People carried flowers, coffee, dry cleaning, all the little proof that life kept moving. I bought bread, eggs, soup, and one small bunch of daisies because my mother used to say fresh flowers could forgive a messy room. When I reached home, my front door was not locked. My first thought was that someone had broken in. My second thought was that I had become so careless I had forgotten to lock it. I pushed it open slowly. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and warm soap. The curtains were pulled wide, letting sunlight spill across the living room. The trash bags that had been sitting near the hallway were gone. The stack of old mail had been sorted into neat piles. And from the kitchen came the sound of water running, a sponge moving, a quiet breath breaking. Then I saw Maribel. For a moment, neither of us spoke. She was wearing a simple cream blouse with the sleeves rolled up, her hair pinned messily instead of perfectly, and yellow gloves covered her hands. Beside her were cleaning supplies, folded towels, and 3 garbage bags tied at the top. My boss, the woman who made executives nervous, was kneeling on my kitchen floor. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time since I had known her, she looked afraid. I should have been angry. I should have demanded how she got inside, why she was touching my things, why she had crossed a line no employer should cross. But the words would not come. All I could do was look around my house, at the dishes drying beside the sink, the swept floor, the sunlight on the table where my mother's sympathy cards were finally opened and stacked with care. My throat tightened so suddenly that I had to set the grocery bag down before I dropped it. Maribel stood slowly and removed the gloves. She explained that my emergency contact file still listed my old neighbor, Mrs. Bellamy, and when I did not answer several calls from the office, HR had contacted her to check on me. Mrs. Bellamy had a spare key because my mother had trusted her. She had let Maribel in after they both feared something had happened. When they found the house empty but saw the state of it, Mrs. Bellamy cried. Maribel stayed. I wanted to feel humiliated, but what I felt was worse and kinder. I felt seen. Not judged from a distance. Not corrected in red ink. Seen in the ruined, unfinished truth of my life. Maribel's voice softened as she said she had planned only to make sure I was safe, but then she saw the dishes, the laundry, the closed bedroom door, the medication bottles on the counter from my mother's final weeks, and she could not leave it that way. She said no one should come home to a house that keeps hurting them. Then she told me the reason, and it broke something open inside me. Years earlier, before the firm, before the sharp suits and glass offices, Maribel had lost her younger sister, Noah, to cancer. After the funeral, Maribel had gone back to work too soon because she believed grief could be defeated by schedule and ambition. Her apartment became unlivable. Dishes, unopened mail, clothes, dust, darkness. She said she once came home ready to disappear into that mess forever, but her own boss, an older woman named Celeste, was waiting inside with soup on the stove and every window open. Celeste had cleaned just enough for Maribel to take one full breath. She had not saved Maribel's life with a speech. She had saved it with a mop, a sandwich, and the courage to enter someone's pain without permission. Maribel's eyes filled as she looked at me. She said she had forgotten that kindness for a long time. She had built walls out of discipline because walls were easier than memories. When she saw me unraveling at work, she recognized herself but punished me for it because my grief reminded her of the part of herself she had buried. Her voice cracked when she said she was sorry. Not a polished office apology. Not a manager protecting herself. A real apology, trembling and human. I sat down at the kitchen table because my knees could not hold me. The daisies had fallen from my grocery bag onto the floor, and Maribel picked them up gently, as if they mattered. That small gesture undid me. I cried harder than I had cried at the funeral. I cried for my mother's empty chair, for the voice messages I still could not delete, for the months I had spent pretending survival was the same as strength. Maribel did not touch me at first. She simply sat across from me and let me fall apart with dignity. That afternoon changed both of us, though not all at once. Healing rarely enters like a hero. It comes quietly, carrying a broom, a glass of water, a list of small tasks. Maribel helped me wash the last plates. Mrs. Bellamy returned with vegetable stew and bread wrapped in foil. We opened my mother's bedroom door together. Dust floated in the sunlight like tiny ghosts. For a second, I thought I would collapse, but Maribel stood beside me and reminded me to breathe. Not as my boss. As someone who had once stood at the same edge and survived. Over the next few weeks, something shifted at work. Maribel did not become soft in the way movies pretend people change overnight. She was still demanding, still precise, still capable of silencing a conference room with one raised eyebrow. But she became fair. She stopped treating exhaustion like laziness. She began asking people what support they needed before mistakes became disasters. She started closing the office early one Friday a month and calling it a reset afternoon. No one knew exactly why at first, but they felt the difference. People laughed more. They asked for help sooner. Even the plants near reception seemed less terrified. As for me, I began rebuilding in small daylight steps. I sorted one drawer. Then one closet. I framed a picture of my mother instead of hiding all of them away. I started taking walks before work through the park where she used to feed sparrows, letting morning light touch my face without feeling guilty for being alive. Maribel moved my deadlines for 1 month, not as pity, but as a plan. She paired me with a senior coordinator who taught me systems I should have learned long ago. Slowly, my work improved. My hands stopped shaking when emails arrived. I began to remember that I was more than the worst season of my life. One bright Saturday, Maribel invited the whole team to volunteer at a community home restoration project. None of us expected her to show up in old jeans, carrying paint rollers and boxed lunches, but she did. We spent the day cleaning and repairing the home of an elderly widower whose kitchen ceiling had leaked for months. Watching Maribel scrub paint from her wrist while sunlight warmed the room, I understood that she was not performing kindness. She was returning to it. Sometimes the good inside a person does not die. It just gets buried beneath fear, regret, and years of pretending not to need anyone. Months later, on the anniversary of my mother's passing, I took the day off. I did not spend it in bed like I had feared. I cleaned the kitchen in the morning, placed daisies on the table, and made my mother's favorite lemon cake even though it came out slightly uneven. Around noon, there was a knock at the door. Maribel stood outside holding a small white envelope and looking awkward, as if kindness still embarrassed her sometimes. Inside was an old photograph of her sister Noah smiling beside a window full of plants. On the back, Maribel had written that grief becomes lighter when it is carried by more than 2 hands. We sat on the porch in the afternoon sun, drinking tea and speaking about the people we missed. No dramatic speeches. No perfect answers. Just 2 wounded people learning that love does not end when someone leaves. It changes shape. It becomes memory, patience, service, and sometimes a person on your kitchen floor with yellow gloves, cleaning the place where your sorrow has been living. Near the end of that day, I finally understood why I had cried when I found my boss cleaning my house. It was not because the house was clean. It was because someone had looked at my mess and did not walk away. Someone had seen the evidence of my pain and answered it with care instead of criticism. In a world that often tells broken people to hurry up and become useful again, Maribel reminded me that being helped is not shameful. It is holy. And sometimes the person who seems the hardest is carrying the softest wound. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe, because your support helps stories like this reach someone who may be silently struggling and waiting for a reason to believe kindness still exists. Special request: comment kindness can save a life if you believe one caring act can change someone's whole future. I still work at Voss and Lark. Maribel is still my boss, though I no longer fear her the way I once did. Every year, on the first warm Saturday of summer, our office team chooses one home in the city and helps clean, repair, paint, or restore whatever has been neglected too long. We call it Noah's Day, though Maribel insists it is not about sadness. It is about opening windows. And whenever I come home now, I notice the sunlight first. I notice the clean table, the daisies, the photograph of my mother smiling from the wall. I notice that grief is still there, but it no longer owns every room. Because one afternoon, when I thought I had lost everything, my boss walked into my broken house, knelt on my kitchen floor, and showed me that mercy does not always arrive with grand words. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in broad daylight, with rolled-up sleeves, trembling hands, and enough love to begin again.